How's it going, guys? John, the Basic Expert here. This is a slightly different video, actually. A little more different, a little maybe weird for some. We'll see if you guys like it or not. But I wanted to make a video talking about Traveler. We haven't talked about Classic Traveler or any version of Traveler in a long time. I did a whole video series in the more early days of the channel, kind of explaining how the game works and what it's about. And in this particular video, I wanted to kind of go back to it. You know, I was talking about Classic Traveler back then, and I want to talk about something that you need to read. I really do think you need to read it, and I think you'll enjoy it. If you plan on running any version of Traveler, really. I mean, even up to, you know, I don't have the 2024 version or the 2020 version, but even if you're looking to run newer Mongoose Traveler, I think you need to read this particular book in order to really grasp what Traveler is really all about and what it's trying to emulate and simulate. So the thing I want you to read, the thing I want you to understand in order to understand how to run and play Traveler, I'm going to say the correct way within the correct setting and environment, is not a supplement, it's not another rule book, it's not another game, it's actually a novel, a story. And in particular, it's H. Beam Piper's Space Viking. This book, I ordered it a while ago when I was looking to run Traveler, and I read it because I was told by others that this is the book you need to read in order to understand what Traveler is trying to be. I think the thing with D&D in particular is that we've all read Tolkien. We have even through the cultural absorption and zeitgeist, we have a sort of understanding of fantasy, right? From Lord of the Rings to we understand who Conan the Barbarian is, especially after the Lord of the Rings films. Fantasy really got an upswing as far as media and presentation is concerned. There's a whole plethora of ideas out there from which we can draw from in varying degrees of correctness in order to bring into D&D and simulate the fantasy setting, simulate the medieval fantasy world. I think maybe things have gone a bit awry in modern D&D with trying to make it sort of more like a modern day West Coast city. In a medieval version of that than like a real gritty, awesome fantasy setting to adventure in. But I digress. Sci-fi is a little more tricky, I think, for people to grasp and understand. And I think when looking at Traveler, any version of it, we want to sort of think of what's in pop media. And that's Star Wars. That's Star Trek. That's things, you know, things of that nature. I think that while those aren't necessarily wrong, those aren't actually, I think, the main influences in what makes Traveler Traveler. I think the main thing that makes Traveler Traveler is just this single book here. Traveler is really an RPG to recreate the adventure in this story right here. And I want to say that this is actually a very interesting and cool book. I think that, you know, I'm not just recommending this to you to read this because I think that it'll make you a better Traveler player and understand the rules in the game a bit more, but because this is a really cool and interesting story to read as well, and I think if you can get your hands on it and read it, I do think you will enjoy it. The story is about a young man who's getting married named Lucas Trask. His soon-to-be bride is named Elaine, and he has his foe, who is his arch rival, who on his wedding day shows up and guns him down and his soon-to-be bride down right after the ceremony. Just guns him down. He shows up in a hover car. Gee, where does that term come from? Does that sound familiar? It's in the book, and it's in Classic Traveler. He shows up in a hover car, guns him down, gets away. He jumps in a ship that kind of looks like the one on the cover here, which is called the Enterprise, I believe. So we can see where I think some ideas from Star Trek come from in some respect, because I believe this book predates Star Trek. Let me see. This is from 1963. When did Star Trek come out? I have to look that up. So I just looked it up. Star Trek is 1966. So yeah, this predates Star Trek. There's a lot of ideas in here. There's even some planet names that I've heard when I called them out when we're talking to friends about them. They're like, "Oh, that's a planet in 40K, Warhammer 40K," and "Oh, that's a planet in Star Wars." And so, to me, it's super cool to see something that we don't really. I think a majority of you, I didn't know about this book for years until just this last year when I read it. I don't think many people know about this book, but there's so many ideas in this book that I think have seeded so many other sci-fi ideas out there, and why I think this is a book picking up and reading, not just to run Traveler, but simply for enjoyment and, seeing those little call-outs and things like that from other intellectual properties. But yeah, this is a story about Lucas Trask. His wife, his now wife, his bride, gets killed on their wedding day. He goes after this man who steals this ship, flies away, and he decides to become a space Viking himself. And space Vikings are individuals that sort of go into space and they harass lower tech planets, essentially, which is interesting because, again, Traveler has tech levels for different planets, and you kind of see this play out in Star Trek, but Star Trek is a little bit more like, oh, we don't want to mess with them, and we're here to be diplomatic and helpful to the people if we do interact with them. Not in Space Viking. In Space Viking, they just show up and they subjugate a planet. They extract resources from it. But the thing that you see within this story is that it kind of evolves into Lucas Trask, who is like royalty. He forsakes royalty to become a space Viking, to become a space pirate, essentially. And he ends up creating his own kingdom, saving like another planet's kingdom in a lot of ways, and becoming rather powerful himself. I don't want to spoil too much because I want you to read it, but it's interesting to see him land on these low-tech planets, how they interact with people. You can get some ideas of how to deal with that with Classic Traveler or any version of Traveler that you're running. How to interact with these lower-tech people. They're not idiots, so they do eventually learn. Like, if you give them the technology, they will eventually learn. That's what occurs in these stories and in this book. And we see so many different things. So like the tech levels, the law levels, this idea of this sort of medieval space feudal system is what's in here. And that's very apparent, like marquises and dukes and princes and things like that. All these sort of royal titles that you see in Traveler based on your scores that you roll, they are in place here. So you can kind of see in space, in the setting, how those structures would lay out in your setting as well. The weapons, a lot of the same weapons that are in here are in Traveler, in Classic Traveler, 1977 Traveler. It's just, when I read this, after having read the Traveler rulebooks, I was like, this is just Space Viking the game. This is just the game. Like this is like the unofficial role playing like game, because maybe Mark Miller couldn't get the IP to this. This is the unofficial role playing game to this, right? Like if we have Star Wars, the role playing game, or Lord of the Rings, the One Ring, like this is Traveler is that to Space Viking, which I think is cool. But the thing is that, again, this is kind of a forgotten book, and I really think that more people should go out and read it. Again, just to see how the setting in Traveler works, how to overlay the feudalistic things over the setting, weapons, what your characters will do. I think you get a good overall view of what the game is going to be about. You start with a ship and a crew, and who knows what that could grow into. It grows into like a whole, almost like a alliance of planets in this book. Perhaps your players can do the same thing and can form the same thing, starting from just a single ship as pirates, maybe, as Space Vikings, all the way up to being rulers of their own planets, and the intricacies and the politics and the backstabbing that could happen there as well. So I really want to encourage you, go out and find a copy of this. They're very cheap on eBay. I believe this book is out of print now, but I think you can get used copies like this very affordably out there right now. So go ahead, check out Space Viking, like, subscribe, share the video. If I got you interested in this, please do that. If you got interested in Space Viking, have you read Space Viking? Let me know in the comments down below. What are other books that you've read that you maybe think would be beneficial for Traveler players and referees to read? I'd love to see those things. I'm always looking to read more books instead of watching TV and making my brain rot, and I encourage you to do the same as well. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.